All right, let me switch layouts here. All right. Hey, what's going on, folks? I see we have Wazzy hanging out in the background. I see Edward in the background too. Yeah, sorry for the sound. I had to close out a bunch of stuff that was feeding back through the mic. So hopefully that didn't just spike everybody's audio and blow your headphones out. My bad. I need to be careful when I have stuff plugged in feeding through my loop because all my computer noise goes straight in through and out through the same sound port. In fact, I might have to chop off that part of the stream if it was really loud. So again, my apologies. All right, let's. Wazzy says, cover art idea. You doing a kickflip over flying saucer as an explosion happens in the background. That's an interesting idea. Kickflip would imply that I'm on a skateboard. Let me make sure the loop sounds are still coming in at the right levels. I was fiddling around in the settings before we started. Bruh. And I actually have a different recording for the bruh button. Let's do the BGM first. Right before the stream started, I was messing around with the loop settings to get everything started. I ended up creating a beat I liked. So let me play it for you guys and then get that set up, and then we'll go ahead and get started on the actual drawing. Let's see. I'll just do this in order. Wazzy says, why don't you ever want to do anything fun like learn how to skateboard and set off explosions? That's fair. I never did learn how to skateboard. I would horribly injure myself if I tried. From what I've seen, you've had similar experiences with skateboarding. How's the BGM if I leave it right here? I'm about 50%. I gotta make sure my mic is at a good distance while I have my tablet set up. All right, I'll leave it here for now, and that should be good for volume. So just to sort of kick things off as we get started here, what I loaded up is one of the things we were working on last drawing stream. I just needed to save a new template. We're not going to use any of this stuff, but we will use the dimensions on here. But on the topic of BGM, one thing that I think folks probably saw on Twitter for sure, but for everyone who's here on the channel, I posted a couple days ago, yesterday, I don't remember what day it was. Early in the week, I posted the official announcement / video for the first BGM collection. And I know it took a long time to get out, and I'm trying to learn how to put everything into Bandcamp and get all that stuff squared away. But I think we're good. And I'm pretty happy with how everything turned out. I will be constantly refining and tweaking my recording process to try and improve the quality of the stuff we do for the loops. But for our first trial run, I think it turned out decently. What I'm working on now, and what we're actually going to be doing for the first part of the stream today, and we'll see how long it takes, is working on a series of concept ideas for the next collection of songs that I'm planning on releasing. And with the first one being the BGM collection and stuff that we've sort of collectively done here on stream, on things like the jam streams and whatnot, the next one is going to be a stream sounds collection. And I've talked a little bit about the difference between those two. In essence, it's still BGM tracks created using beatboxing sounds and the loop. Stream sounds is dedicated specifically to the stuff we do outside of the jam streams. It's still kind of a collaborative process, but sometimes you guys are here to give me input, and sometimes I just sort of mess around with the loop when I'm doing things like drawing, or we've done it on the challenge streams where I create random beats to use in the background. I've saved all of those throughout the streams, and I plan on putting those in their own collection of BGM loops. I don't know if I've ever asked the chat to help me name stuff, maybe, but stream sounds will be kind of miscellaneous beats that I think are noteworthy enough from our streams to be in their own collection. So that's kind of going to be the distinction between the names. We'll have BGM collection stuff that is more of a collaborative effort with you guys in chat, and then the stream sounds is just sort of the miscellaneous other stuff that's a byproduct of the other streams we do. And currently there's 3 recorded tracks in stream sounds, and there's probably about 4 or 5 more that I'm thinking of pulling and putting in there. So between now and whenever I get a chance to finish that's what I'll be working on. So for the drawing stream today, what I thought would be interesting would be to experiment around with some ideas for the stream sounds cover. Again, my album art doesn't need to be necessarily that complex or fancy. As things become more refined and I get better at doing stuff like this, I'll probably end up commissioning actual album art for some of the more polished stuff. But for now, what I wanted to experiment around with today for the stream art would be something that features my mascot, who I don't really talk about a lot, but I know I've mentioned it before. But I want to do a real simple album art graphic featuring my mascot Tenpo. And I don't think I've never drawn Tenpo on stream before. So the idea of him actually being more of a fleshed out character, and besides just the logo which you see on my clothing and on my thumbnails, and things like my outro cards for my videos, the red note creature, I thought it'd be good to experiment around with some ideas for actually putting him into a rendered and realized state for the sake of album art. And thankfully, part of that work has been done for me as I've been working with other people, and Wazi could attest to this since I did work with her on the commission stuff for the loading animation. But thanks to that collaborative work, there's already been some ideas put in place for how I think the character is designed and drawn. So what I'm going to do is start with some rough ideas for the character, and then see how I want to translate that into a design for the album art. Probably the easiest way to do that is just starting with some rough primary sketches for the basic layout, and then worry about things like what we want to have Tenpo doing. So for the basic shape and design for Tenpo, the creature himself is pretty simple in shape. He's got a round, almost completely circular, more of like a semi-circular shape, and then the long tail from the back that goes up like this. Again, designed kind of like a musical note. And this isn't readily visible on the logo or emblem version of Tenpo that's on most of the stuff that I make. But he does have limbs. He has little stubby flap-like limbs, arms, but no legs. What I'll need to do is be mindful of how everything is kind of aligned just as part of the rough sketch here. It doesn't need to be exact. And like we see in the animation that Wazi did for the channel, Tenpo's got kind of a bounciness to him, and I really like the way he was animated, and sort of the simple frames of him kind of jumping up and down, but being more kind of elastic in nature. That was one thing we talked about, and I think Wazi did a good job there. And for Tenpo's mouth and sort of this underbelly section here, it's got kind of an underbite some sort of sharp-looking teeth. I wonder... I don't have a still frame from that animation that I can use. Let me see. I do have something else that's sort of in the works, but I don't really want to show it off for now since it's not really official. So we'll keep working with the ideas here. And now would be a good time to experiment around with things like placement of the eyes. I do like the sort of wider spaced eyes that give Tempo kind of a more unassuming, almost kind of vacant expression. Even do something like this kind of simple expression and layout of the face makes it pretty easy to sort of change his mood just by manipulating the shape of the eyes, which was kind of the intention of doing such a simple character design. Edward says, what if you move him towards the right and the part of the tail that gets cut off at the edge shows up at the left edge, so the art is like a loop? Oh, are you talking about like a head-on? Like, more like a head-on shot like this? Let me see if I can kind of capture what Edward's saying here. Towards the right part, it gets cut off at the edge. Let me know if this is closer to what you're talking about, Edward. It's a little bit difficult to visualize. I know, because you're trying to describe things within the drawing. But what we're doing here is brainstorming, so that's good. Okay, Edward's saying, I think you could do what I'm saying with the first drawing. just rereading what you said over and trying to understand. Let's see. What we can do is put another layer up here too. The part of the tail that gets cut off at the edge shows up at the left edge. The art is like a loop. I guess first off, when you say the art's like a loop, you're not talking about the loop symbol, are you? I guess we should define what we're talking about too, just so I understand. Because when I think of like a loop, I immediately think of the loop station symbol, and I don't know if that's what you're talking about. So just to sort of clarify, the loop symbol looks like this. And it's a circle. A really poorly drawn circle. That's the actual loop station symbol from the hardware. Here, let me do this. I do think the body needs, the position of the body needs to be changed a little bit. And part of the reason for that is because the actual tail, Tenpo's tail doesn't come out of the top of his head. It's actually coming from behind him. So maybe it'll be easier to sort of do a multiple reference point of the perspectives, so we know kind of what to work with the character. That's not necessarily clear from what I've drawn here, so let me try and fix that. And that may give us some more ideas on how to work with the positioning and the ideas. So the body's right here. Again, the body itself is kind of round and a little bit lumpy. And eye would be here. Mouth would be here. Arm would be here. And the tail comes up from about here. And it goes up like this. So the problem with the way I drew the first one right here is it's a little bit too head on almost. It's like a semi three-quarters perspective going this way. But you don't really get a good idea of where the tail's coming from because of that unusual angle. If it was completely sideways, it'd be a lot more easy to see. So let's see how we can fix that a little bit. There, the side view is actually a better indication of what Tenpo's body shape looks like. Okay, Edward says, think of a line going down, Tenpo, and imagine that as the edge of the cover art. Part of his body Part of the body to the left would be poking out of the edge of the screen and vice versa. Part of the left would be poking out of the edge of the screen. Part of the body to the left, the line poking out of the... Okay, alright, line going down. I think I understand. Again, it's a little bit tough to visualize this, and that's not your fault, Edward. Let's see. Poking out of the edge of the screen. So are you talking about potentially doing like a framing thing? Because where there's like a frame around the character. Well, that's not a good example for what you're saying. Like a frame kind of, this is just a rough approximation. I don't know if this is exactly what you're saying, but you basically have him sort of in frame and out of frame of some sort of boundary for the art itself. Because the album art itself isn't going to be a fully realized scene. Okay, that might be one thing I want to sort of set up for you guys, just to give you an idea of what I want to do for this. I don't want to do a scene for the art. I mostly want to do a simple standalone drawing that's going to basically just be on the image itself. The intention wasn't to make it super complex, so I was really focusing on just getting a drawing for Tempo himself. It wouldn't necessarily be him, you know, with a background, anything fancy like that. I think that'd be probably a little more effort than's necessary for just a simple Stream Sounds, at least the prototype Stream Sounds collection. But one thing I was thinking, and I do want to keep your idea in mind, Edward. So keep trying to give me details about what you're saying until I get closer to what you're talking about. It almost seems like something like what we're doing here would be easier to do on something like a collaborative drawing program. That's something I need to think about for the future. Something like Aggie.io, which I've only used once before. As far as being able to put ideas together, that might not be a bad thing to think about in the future. Alright, let me get rid of this. But to sort of build off the initial idea I had would be some sort of rendering for Tempo sitting in kind of a neutral state, but I wanted to give him headphones. Specifically, I wanted to give him the same kind of headphones that I have. And the overall art. Okay, Edward says the cover of Earl Sweatshirt Doris is what I'm talking about. Okay, alright, a visual sample would be helpful. Let me look that up. I have never heard of Earl Sweatshirt. Is that a band? Okay. So what I see here is sort of a straight shot. Looks like a room. You're looking straight on at the corner of a room, and you got the dude sort of off center to the side, and then what looks like a Jesus on a cross on the right or left side. I'm gonna assume Earl Sweatshirt's a rapper based on the art. It says Almas Doris. His arm showing on the left edge. Oh, I see what you're saying. What? Okay, so that's an interesting effect. I think I understand what you're saying now. This is a repeated image, but because it's got that separation in the middle, it actually looks like you're looking at the corner of a room, like a straight on at a right or a 90-degree angle. You're looking at it 45 degrees, and each of the sections where it's divided looks like different parts of the intersecting wall. Okay, and then it's basically the image, and then it's copied, and then it's like a mirror, not a mirror. It's more like an additional copy that's coming out of the side on the left edge. So it looks like it's a repeating sequence of images. Okay, I think I understand now. Thanks for the visual. When you said coming out of the screen, I was thinking more like a three-dimensional perspective. But if we're to separate out our window, let me see. Got us on the other screen here. A little bit of a challenge to visualize if we were to do something similar. That particular kind of style with the image layout might be a little more complex than what I'm envisioning for this, but let's see if I can kind of duplicate that effect. I don't know if the dividing panel line here would necessarily be that necessary, but let's see, hopefully. Alright, that's on its own layer. Let's pretend that this right here is the edge of the canvas. I guess we're right up against the edge of the canvas anyway. Why am I not getting... Where'd my pen go? Again, for following the edge of the canvas, it'd be something kind of like that, and then this line right here is just sort of like a dividing thing, and it wouldn't even necessarily need to be there. if the edge of the canvas is right here, and let's say the entire space for the art itself is something like this, that could be an interesting idea. Again, might be a little more complicated than what I was originally envisioning, but I do think the idea of doing funky things with the graphical layout is a cool idea. Edward says, don't forget about that spaceship kickflip though. I'll have to file that idea away for future use. Maybe on something like a non-Beats album. I would have to get someone else to draw that. I don't think I could draw a really good image of my character kickflipping over a spaceship. I'm going to leave this here. What I want to focus on, before we look at layout and how to sort of set up everything, I want to figure out a good rendering and drawing for Tempo himself. Again, this first one that we started with here is a good start, but I want to try rotating a little more. So what I'm going to do is work on some perspective sketches. The rough layout and character design is not going to change, but it's more of just his position. Because, like I mentioned before, my original idea for just what he's doing would be potentially having headphones on, and I just realized that I have to think about how I would actually do that, because I haven't even figured out where his ears are. And in fact, if we look at adding in headphones as a detail, that may actually solve the problem of the perspective, because now the top of his head's more clearly defined because it's bounded by the top of the headphones. I think I might ultimately need to redo how the tail looks, but for basic preliminary stuff, that's not too big a deal. Something like this. That is a really, really terrible music note. Oh boy. So the overall design would be something really simple like this, with Tempo here with the headphones on, with little music notes around it. Something pretty simple and not too crazy. I do like that idea. I think it might need a bit more tweaking as far as, again, the body positioning and whatnot. But this is a rough idea of what I was thinking for the character graphic itself. Now, to humor Wazi, in case she comes back or checks this out later, I don't know if she's still here, but her idea for the flying saucer Now I gotta try and see if I can draw someone doing a kickflip. I'm really bad at dynamic. Dynamic poses, if we do something like this. Well, let's see which way, going maybe this way? This way. Like an explosion in the background. I was gonna say when Ozzy suggested that, she better be careful what she suggests, because if she gives me something that's pretty outlandish that I actually like, I'm just gonna ask her to animate it for me. Here's my crude approximation of somebody kickflipping over a UFO with an explosion in the background. Unless she meant like a mushroom cloud explosion. What we'll do is we'll keep jotting down ideas on the canvas here. I don't want to spend a ton of time on just this portion of the drawing stream, but I did want to devote some time to at least putting some ideas down. What I'm doing here is playing around with some slightly different angles from the first one that I did, just to see if it gives me something to work with a little bit easier than this first one right here. Edward says, how about just a tiny UFO far away in the upper corner without it being under any skateboard tricks? What you're saying is having the kickflip and the explosion being more front and center, but then the UFO is kind of over here in the distance. And everything's going on here in the front. I think that'd be funny. I just don't know if it's necessarily thematically in line with anything I've done, because I don't skateboard, and it would be kind of a fun goofy idea, but I don't know if it necessarily makes sense for something like a beatbox sound collection. Edward says, I mean, just the UFO. Oh, are you talking about like in the actual composition with tempo without having all of the skateboarding and explosion stuff? So like if we were to just, again, bound the album art here, having something like a UFO up in the corner here. Let me sort of. Oh, okay. All right, I got you, Edward. That could be an interesting idea. I would definitely have to refine my actual UFO because that's pretty terrible. But you get the idea. That could work. I'm assuming we're going with the idea of a UFO to reinforce the fact that I'm an alien, which makes sense. Yeah, I think that's got some potential. Let me rough in the rest of this particular angle for Tenpo. Get more of a consistent shape. Something about I think that it's the eye position. He looks worried. I don't know why. I think that it's the eye position. Alright, that's a little bit better. Now the real question, this particular angle is very similar to the first one, but it's a bit more leaning to the side, leaning this way. Edward asks, does he have eyelids? Tenpo does not have eyelids. He has these round, spherical eyes, and they open and close, but he doesn't have lids like this. Boy, this right here just describes my entire week. It has been a very busy week at the job, and I'll be very glad when it's done. Edward says, low tempo. Yeah, this is tired tempo. So to answer the question about the expression, the way his face changes expression is just the shape of the eyes. So like the grumpy one would be like this, and these are actually just shaded in kind of like that. There's no actual lids, although I think it would be kind of funny, but I wanted to keep the character's expression easy to manipulate. So like if he was mad, then it's just a matter of changing the shape like that. Again, they're shaded in kind of like this. Now this particular pose I think is pretty serviceable. It's a little bit easier to show detail like the tail and the angle compared to the first one. But the real challenge would be adding in the headphones and not having the headphones completely obscure everything. So if we did that, try and rough in something like this. That's actually not bad. Let me erase the bounding here. We'll leave the UFO on the side. So if we were to do something like this, I think I'd have to make the tail longer, go a little bit further up. That's not a big deal for sort of the rough sketch here. You know, with this idea that you suggested, Edward, with the UFO, it's not really easy to show here. Let me move this out of the way. It did give me an idea for something I wasn't readily thinking about before. But if we were to take this and maybe move it a little bit further. We're thinking of this whole thing as the real estate for the album art. Oh. Let me save this. If this whole thing up here is kind of the bounding of the entire canvas for the album art, and the UFO's up here in the corner, we could do something like having the UFO. This is real crude approximation, but have the UFO beaming kind of like sound waves to Tempo, who's sitting here vibing with the headphones on. And whether or not we did it with that, almost looks like he's being abducted. But we could even do something like this where we have notes and they get bigger as they go out and then all the way down until they get a little bit closer. So it looks like the ship itself is kind of beaming notes to his headphones, and that's what he's listening to. Now, that again wasn't something I was readily thinking about when I started doing this, but it's an interesting idea. You do something like this, or it looks like it's beaming a bunch of music notes directly at him, and you get more of a perspective deal from this way out here up in the corner. And I didn't really plan on having him again, part of a scene. So if you did something like that and just had him kind of sitting on like a table or a chair. That could be something really functional that we work with. I kind of like the concept. Just don't mind my incredibly terrible crude musical notes. And then maybe we have text here. Edward says it could also look like it's dropping a bunch of tempos and they're going to take over the world. So if you're to do something like that, you have this, and then off in the distance, it's just dropping a whole bunch of them like down here and here. These circles are meant to represent like a rough drawing of the character. So it looks like it's flying in the background, dropping like a swarm onto the earth. That'd be interesting too. I'll have to play around with some ideas. Again, the point of the artwork is not to do a full scene, just something kind of simple as cover art. But I do also like the idea of a kind of progression for the future collections that I do, since I'm probably going to limit the stream sounds to maybe, I'll see how many tracks I end up with, but probably less than 10, like maybe 6 to 8 total, and then cut it off there, and then the next one will be 6 to 8. And then each art could have sort of a progression as far as what graphics are on there and what they're showing. Edward says, I mean, just the notes you already drew, but it could be seen that way. Oh, okay, I gotcha. So whether or not it's in a pattern like this, or if we kept the same thing but we had more of them kind of dropping out this way. Boy, I suck at drawing musical notes. You have to play around the perspective to show that they're kind of doing something like that. If just ignore the beam here for what you're talking about. But you do something like have the UFO visibly moving kind of this way with motion lines or however, and then it's dropping a bunch of note things out the bottom. Because if we're talking about a progression of art, like the first one I think is going to be pretty straightforward. Maybe I'll have just tempo and like the UFO somewhere in the border of the art. But then the next Stream Sounds collection would have something more involved, like tempo sitting on like a platform, talking to a whole bunch of other of his species in like a crowd, kind of like a stage. That could be like the second one, or like they're on the deck of a UFO and he's, you know, up here on a platform giving a speech, and then there's a whole bunch of his kind in the audience like this, and then that's the scene. And then the next one could be him leading like a whole army, like a whole row of them kind of like marching down the street or something like that. I kind of like the idea that there's a progression of events between the different collections. those are all good ideas. We could even do something, if we were going to keep this simple and not have a whole bunch of action going on. If it was just tempo sitting in the foreground with the UFO in the background, we could even have it transmitting a bunch of stuff. You remember to put the antenna on the headphones too. We could do something like this where, it's hard to tell. We have the UFO in the background transmitting a signal from however distance this is, supposedly far away, and he's sitting here hanging out, and wherever he's hanging out, and he's getting the actual signal from this here. You could do something like that. That way it's pretty simple. I don't know. I'll have to play around with some ideas and test some layouts. But fortunately, I'll be able to refer back to the things we talk about in this stream in the future when it comes to brainstorming ideas and how I want to put stuff together. That's the whole point of these. But I think what I want to do is move on to the fusion part. It's very possible that I'm not going to be able to get through the whole thing today. What I would like to do is get through at least the primary and sketch phase of the final fusion for the Monster Hunter project. So let me pull that up. I'm going to pull up the last one we finished. I may have to pull up the first one too, since it had some primaries on it as well. But let me do that. And then I'm going to keep this. I'm going to keep this file that we worked on, and I'll think about some additional ideas and whatnot, and how to sort of incorporate it. So yeah, thanks for all of the ideas, Edward. I do think there's a lot of possibilities to do some fun stuff with these cover arts. Where did I save it? This one? Yep. Our big armored bear creatures. The other one. Actually, let me do this. This is something I want to put on Twitter, and it's going to be a bit of an aside, but I think it would be helpful to put together just for everybody watching now and in the future for this fusion project. So hopefully I have enough room to do this. I'm going to move my monitor back. My tablet back, but not tilted up so far that it obscures my webcam. All right. Let's see you. Alts go here. Okay. What I want to do, and I'll probably post this on Twitter later if I'm happy with the results. I want to post an updated diagram of the fusions, because we've been working on this across multiple sessions and I've been talking about it for a while, but I think it'll be helpful for people to actually see what the end goal of this project is. So let me see, where's the other one? So what I need are the other two fusions that we've done along the way, and I need to plop them into this main canvas. And hopefully it doesn't screw with the resolution too badly. Oh, thanks, Edward. I gotta update the caption of what we're doing. Thank you. If anybody joined, they would be probably really confused what we're doing. Okay, what we're gonna do is I have to scale these up a bit, and hopefully they don't get too fuzzy if it's being scaled this resolution. Okay, well, that's fine. I'm going to make a duplicate of the third one. Merge them into one layer. Hide this. Okay. So what I want to do here is, I know this is a jumbled mess to kind of look at, but what I want to do is create a preview diagram of the fusion chart that we're using for our subjects. And we can do that by starting with the sample, unless I drew directly on it, which would be really unfortunate. No. Okay, good. What I'm going to do is take this sample chart, which we've referred to a couple times throughout the Fusion project. Anyone who's watching this or seen the previous ones will recognize what I'm going to do here. So we've got the 3 monster subjects from the popular Monster Hunter series, and I gotta try and organize them in a way that's gonna not make this too cluttered. And this is an experiment. I've never done something quite like this before, so we'll see how it works out. What I need is, where is my line tool? Right here. Okay. What I'm going to do now is start drawing in the through lines that are going to represent the fusion diagram. So let's see, we could do kind of a blue color. That should be fine. I want this to look somewhat symmetrical too, which is going to be a challenge. I think I need to redraw this line. Oh, of course. This particular layout might look familiar if you've seen other people do these on the internet. If you just look up character triple fusions, I think is what they call them. Okay. Yeah, this they have a couple different names. Hexafusions. That actually makes more sense the way they have it listed out on this particular one. It's more like a hexagon. Yeah, I think I like the way that looks better. What I really should do is just go into a graphic template and then draw this out. We'll see if I can get it together here. I'm going to do a test layout for here and try and explain what I'm trying to replicate here. We'll see if I can do a good job. Again, this is a bit of an experiment for something I'm working on. Then we need to do another one going here. Doing something like this. Kind of a lopsided hexagon. Is it hexagon? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, six-sided diagram. I might need to drop the corner ones down. Let me see if I can fix that too. This isn't final, but I do want it to be somewhat organized. Where is Zeno? Here. Separate layers. If I merge these two layers together, I should be able to drop it down. Let's do it this way. Kind of like that. Flip it. Vertical. There we go. That's a little bit better. Just need to get rid of these parts. Now, if I move everything around the corners and get it sort of line up, that should be fine for what I'm doing here. Sorry, this is kind of messy. Still need more room at the top, otherwise the top result here is going to get cut off. Let's drop these ones down a little more. Edward says the unholy trinity. I guess we are creating horrible abominations. The power of science / fan art. Okay, I'm going to leave this kind of the way it is for now, and I'll most likely need to fix this later and clean it up a little bit. It's not perfect, but for the sake of illustrating what I'm doing with this project, it should be fine. So what I wanted to do is show everybody who's never seen this particular project this sort of sneak peek at what we're creating. And so to do that, I'm just going to be taking a face shot of all of the hybrid fusion results and putting them in the different spots of the diagram. So let me cut everything out, and that should be somewhat self-explanatory. Thought about putting a border around them, give them kind of like a portrait, but I don't think that's necessary for just a sample here. Although it might have, because there's no way to see what I was taking the pictures of, there's no way to tell that it's actually meant to be a bounded square. If I put a border on it, then you'd be able to tell. I wonder if I can step back far enough to do that. What if we did cut, delete, what I'm thinking about doing is putting just a flat background behind them. Something like that. Now that could work. It's gonna make this thing a little bit more cumbersome, but if I do that, then now I have something that's bounded, so now it actually looks like more like a portrait. I think I like that better. That'll make it easier to see. I'll have to play around with the formatting, but that should work. I'll just have to recut out everything from the creatures I just did. This one, I'll do like kind of an off gray color. And you could probably just merge these. Save some space on the actual canvas and make this easier to look at. Okay, so now the diagram's sort of coming together. I'll have to sort of tweak this a little bit, but now the only thing left to do is put in the final fusion section, which if I was doing like a teaser, which is kind of the intention of doing this, you're basically doing this. Font is that? Oh, Impact. My favorite meme font. Let me see if I can just get something that's not quite as so weird looking for a question mark. Yeah, that's fine. Okay. So again, this is kind of a crude version of this hex diagram. The way people do these online, it looks a lot cleaner, and I may need to actually just change the size of my canvas. But what we've done with this project is take these three monsters. I'm just going to change the angle here and sort of make this a little more symmetrical. Take the three monsters, fuse two at a time together, 3 times. So these two up here yield this monster. these two down here yield this one, and these two over here yield this one. And then the final product, which I'm not going to have time to really get through today, but we could start doing some primary sketch work and get some ideas together. The final one is going to combine not all 6 or all 3 even. It's not combining subject 1, 2, and 3. It's combining fusion 1, 2, and 3. Again, in the actual order I did them, it'd be 1, 2, and 3. So it's not the original creatures being combined together, it's their hybrids that are combining together. So that makes it a lot more difficult, because we could have just done a sort of mishmash of the 3 to begin with, and then that would have been the project. But this exercise with these triple fusions is coming up with a 2-component fusion right here at the top, sides, and then the final one is a mega fusion of the actual fusion creatures. So you have to take elements from this one, and this one, and put them all together to come up with a final. And that's going to be quite the challenge. But it should be interesting. So I think what I'll do for the remainder of the time I have set aside to work on this stuff is I'm going to start sketching some primaries, and what we'll do is we'll jump to the old file that had the old resolution. I'm going to dig up the primaries I had there and just see if there's anything I want to use before I get back into creating some designs. Let me do that. Move my keyboard out of the way again. Maybe what I'll do before I finalize this particular diagram is put the names of the creatures on here in case someone is not familiar with Monster Hunter. Alright, jump over to this one. Let's see, there's a whole bunch of sketch primaries for the ones we've created so far. But what we need are, I don't even think I labeled these. Okay, here's one. Like I mentioned before, to sort of recap to recap how I decide what components and how to sort of build out the fusion creature, I have to pick a body type or a species type for whatever the fusion is going to be. And I'm thinking because it's a little bit less common in the Monster Hunter universe for what they've done in the game so far, they haven't really done a lot with the bear type and the sort of upright bipedal creature that you see here, which was the 3rd fusion that we finished recently, had the same body type. Doing a really large scale creature with that particular type is not common. There's only been a couple in the game so far. So I think for the sake of the fusion, the mega fusion of all of these, I want to use the same body type, but I'm going to have to come up with a pose or a position for it that's going to be different from the one that we just finished. So I'm going to keep this one on hand. What I mean by the pose is, for this one, the Zenogre and Volvidon fusion, this is the body type we're going to use, but I'm going to see if I can mess around with the proportions and the pose to distinguish it from this one. And that's going to be quite a challenge in itself. So for the remainder of the time, I'm going to work on sketching some stuff together here, and we'll see We'll see what we can come up with in between now and when I do the next drawing stream for this project. If I don't come up with anything I really want to go with, I'll probably spend some time offline coming up with more ideas, and then when we get back together to actually draw the final fusion in the series, I'll have a primary to work off, and we'll basically go straight into inking, coloring, and highlighting, and then we'll do sort of a big project wrap up at the end. So if I don't get enough ideas together today, then I'll continue to work on it offline until I come up with something. But let me see if I can switch up the BGM for the remainder of the time. Alright, that's beat repeat. This is beat repeat with the rewind instead of the move forward feature, which is a little bit different from the way I normally use that particular command. What happens if we apply it to the baseline? Oh, we get no progression. It'll just repeat. That's an interesting effect. This is with the beat repeat using the rewind, but using a track reverse on the bass line by itself. Alright, let's try shift. I'll mess around with a couple more commands and then we'll go back into the drawing itself. Beat shift makes it sound kind of irregular and weird. I don't know if I like that. This was beat scatter on. I think that works. It doesn't need to be dramatically different. We'll leave it here for now. Alright. Now I get to think about how I want to design the final fusion in the series for the project. I think I'll start small. thinking of some rough positions and how I want to have the creature's body posed, as it were. And this thing is going to be on the bulkier side. The quote-unquote bear-type creatures in Monster Hunter tend to have a pretty heavy build, with a couple exceptions. So I like the idea of this thing being kind of a chunky boy. I'm going three fingers, one thumb, just like we did on the other ones. I like the idea of the open mouth, kind of like a roaring pose, but we'll see if that actually pans out. Alright, that could work. Oh. Scale the whole thing up. This is the same exercise we did before when we were looking at mapping out the proportions in pose. Did a real rough, approximate, zoomed in one. Then I blew it up and then tried to get more of a roughed in definition at a larger scale. And then I went in to look at doing finer detail. That seemed to work out a lot better. I haven't always drawn things that way, but I like the results a little bit better that way. So now we're doing, again, rough proportions. And I can do things like mess around with the way it's posed, or rotate it, or do whatever I need to do to sort of get things finalized. Now, based on this, we can hide that primary. Now start trying to define things a little bit better for the rough proportions, and then I'll need to go in and do another one. This is probably going to take 3 or 4 basic primaries just to get the position where I want it. I kind of feel like this thing needs longer arms. Its limbs seem a little bit too sort of stubby and compact. Let's see if we can fix that. Maybe just extend that out a little bit. Go to about there. Yeah, I think it's a little bit better. I do think the legs need to be on the kind of short, stubby side, but in the interest of not making it look like it has no calves, I'm gonna extend out the legs a little bit and just put placeholders for everything. Like so. And I think that'll be a bit more functional. Now the real interesting part that's probably going to take the most brainstorming is adding in detail. The pose here I think is pretty set. If we I'm going to need to scale this up again. Might need to scale this up again. Yeah. Okay. Let's go maybe about 40% larger. Yeah, that's probably okay. It doesn't need to be completely up to scale with this one. I can fix that at the very end too. Maybe a little bit bigger. Okay, compare the pose. They're similar. Again, similar body types, so it's not like the poses are going to be dramatically different. I could go for something really dynamic, like have this one right here, sort of jumping through the air, but I really want to show off its specific design elements, so it doesn't need to be anything radically different. I do like it's got a bit more of a forward-leaning pose, like it's getting ready to square off at something. So I think that'll work. I'll go a little bit bigger. This thing's gonna kind of fill the canvas for its base design. Okay. Now it comes down to putting in specific details. That's going to be the third or fourth primary. Now we actually start creating creature details, and then we have the rough pose, which can adjust as we need. But now what I consider the kind of fun part of the brainstorming is figuring out, all right, what do we want to put on this thing? We have to follow... We have to follow the fusions. So we'll probably start at the head. And start trying to figure out what details we want as far as the combination of features from all of the fusion components, and this is going to probably take a few passes to figure out. I like the idea of it retaining the horns. That was what you saw in the primary I showed off a little bit ago from earlier on in the project. We could sort of combine the ideas of the rough shell and armor head parts that we saw on... I keep going the wrong one. On this fusion. And then sort of combine it with some of the features from here. The tongue is definitely going to be one of the final fusion components. I think that's it's a pretty signature design element, and it would be kind of a disservice to not include that in some capacity. Maybe we can do... I did this before. We'll just do it here. I was thinking about doing like a more close-up head render, but nah, instead of doing that, we'll just keep working from here. It's fine. I do like the more recessed in eyes from the Volvidon Narga hybrid. What I was trying to do here with this section is give it that same coloring, like the red stuff here around the eye. I do want to incorporate that somewhat, but it's going to be a little bit tricky. Alright, because the Zinogre Volvodon fusion was sort of a mix of fur coming from the head and then going down the body and then had plates on its arms, I kind of want to have the Mega Fusion be a kind of furred body with armor running along the top, kind of the inverse. But before I do that, let's get horns. Swept forward horns. Like so. That's a pretty distinct design feature that we're going to need to include. So if we follow the way this sort of shell plating is running along the head, what I'm thinking is, like for the body, we'll have it be sort of furry going down here. Maybe all the way down here. And then we'll figure out what we're going to do with the tail. But I sort of like the idea of, well, I need to get the neck straightened out here. I kind of like the idea of the plating going this way along the lower jaw and then down to the neck and sort of ending. I was thinking of having it maybe kind of like a plating along the chest, but that wouldn't really make much sense from a biology standpoint. The creature, if it has sort of a shell running along its shoulders and the top of its body going down to its back, it wouldn't necessarily make sense for that to be suddenly here. The creature wouldn't necessarily naturally make sense to have sort of sporadic shelled plating, if that makes any sense. Instead, I'd much rather the plating kind of follow a similar pattern. So for this fusion, for example, it starts at the shoulders in this area and ends. I kind of like the idea of it running all the way from up here along the head, going down the back, continuing along the arms, and looking kind of like, again, metal plated armor. You could even have the fur sort of ending at the wrists, and then the actual claws themselves are more scaly, like we've seen on things like Narga's paws. And that would be keeping in line with what we saw on this fusion here. Roughen the spots where the claws would be for now. That's fine. If you really want to incorporate some of the other parts of the other fusions, we could give it the same sort of blade thing that comes off of the hand. I'll have to think about whether or not I want to include that. I'm talking about this thing right here. We'll have to see what makes sense in the final design, I think. I'm just going back in here to redefine this section of the jaw. I'm probably gonna have to mess around with this a little more to get it to line up properly. For the legs, I like the idea of it being furred upper quads type area here. And then the actual feet would be, let's see. Probably something like that, with the kind of gauntlet or bracer looking lower part. For the tail, we've got 3 different styles of tail. We have this one, which has the fur running along the top. This one is kind of similar. It's got kind of a trailing edge along the top, and then a fleshy part on the underside. And then this one has shell running along the top, regular flesh, and then the end has the spikes. I kind of want to include the spikes because that's a little bit of a distinct feature. But what if we had the fur sort of end about here? We had the tail go sort of like this. And then have the plated spikes at the end. This is, again, a rough approximation of something like that. Or we could have the fur run all the way to the edge. I guess there wouldn't really be an evolutionary reason why I would cut off there. So we could do something like that. It'll need to be cleaned up a little bit. And one feature that I did include on the previous primary that I think would be helpful for setting this particular fusion apart from the other one of the same body type. I'm doing it, just adding in the claws here. Placeholder. But for the back, and if we flip over to the previous canvas, I'm going to show you what I'm kind of talking about here. Where is it? Oh, it's down here. Yeah. One thing I included here was kind of more of a set of spikes going along the back with this shelled plating, giving it more of kind of an armored look, taking a page out of the kind of a combination of these two. Basically taking these sharp spikes and sort of the armored plating and combining them with the shell reinforced armor look down here, kind of putting them together and to get shelled plates. Right away, just based on what we've done so far, I'm already liking this particular fusion's pose and layout better than the previous temp version. So that's good. I think there's still a lot of work to be done as far as adding in more detail and sort of finalizing things, but this is definitely a step in the right direction that I want to go for this one. When I was talking about spikes running along the back and whatnot, I mean, maybe not something quite that pronounced. I'm thinking about adding something else that's going to kind of add to the overall detail. It's difficult because we're kind of seeing the upper body face on, or head on. If it was completely sideways, we'd be able to see what the back looks like. So even doing something like this and adding in the spikes, I think is a good start. So we'll have to see. This I'm not sure about. I don't know if we're going to be able to fit that in. We'll have to see. And likewise for the tail, again, I'm not 100% committed to this particular style. One thing that occurred to me after I drew it in is having the lower body sort of continue this way and then eventually becoming the tail. There's nothing biologically that would make sense about it, something becoming kind of fleshy on the underside. So it may make more sense just to have the whole thing be sort of furry, maybe like to here, and then end closer to the tip of the tail, and the tip of the tail is not furry but covered in these plated spikes, and do something like that. That may actually make more sense. I'll need to eventually clean up the angle here. Going from the neck, the chest technically starts here. We have the other shoulders. And the way the armor sort of runs down that way. A lot of it needs to be sort of refined a little bit and cleaned up. And then likewise, I'll need to make sure the legs, while short, are still proportionately large enough to support this thing's body weight. They're a little bit small, but I don't think they're a problem yet. They may need to be stockier just to so they're not little stick legs. I think I'm going to make a judgment call and take the claw thing out here. It'd be nice to include, but I think it's going to make this a little bit busy. Maybe you could do something like this and just make it a sharp edge protrusion on this particular part, which we can't see from this angle. I think what we've got is a pretty good starting point. Again, I'm liking this one a lot better than this particular primary. This one was pretty rough and not really a good indication of the pose, more just some ideas. This one I feel is a lot more refined. It's going to need some more tweaking before I feel like I want to start inking on getting all the details. But like I mentioned before, what I'm planning on doing before we get back together to finish off the final fusion, which I'd hope to do today, but we got some good progress on the album art as well, so it's still productive. But my plan between now and whenever we finish off this set of fusions will be to finalize the sketch. I'll work on this some more offline and try and tweak it a little bit more and get everything together. Yeah, I need to flip my canvas more often. basically, when we, like I mentioned before, when we get back together to finish off the project, we'll go straight into inking, color assignment, shading, and compile everything into one final diagram, and then that'll be it for the set of Monster Hunter Fusions. And I realize this whole project has taken a long time. It's been months at this point working on this off and on. And I plan on doing this again, but I don't know if I'm going to do it on stream. I may do another set on my own time because I can work a little bit faster when I'm not narrating. But if I do that, I will... Maybe I could put it up as like speed drawing content. That might be more interesting for those that aren't able to catch this in real time. If I record myself drawing the different fusions, each step of the process, then I can put them up as YouTube videos with background music or something like that. We'll see. That could be a good alternate type of content to sort of fill things in. We'll go ahead and save here. I think this is a good stopping point. I'll do some more work on this offline. Next time we do a drawing stream, I don't know if it's going to be this specifically. It'll depend on what I want to do. But we're finally reaching the end of the grand experiment. Going back to our diagram, and I'll tweak this a little bit before I put it up on Twitter, just so people who are following me that may not have seen the streams know what I'm working on. This is going to be the sort of teaser. Like, here's what we've done so far. Here's all of the fusions at this point. The final one is going to be the last sort of capstone for the project. But we'll go ahead and call that a stream here. Once again, thanks to all the folks that stopped by and hung out. It's always good to sort of bounce ideas off you guys in the chat when I'm coming up with ideas for anything, be it drawings or beats or whatnot. And I do appreciate you guys coming in and hanging out. When we get back together later in the week, I'm going to be doing a gaming stream, but I haven't figured out what I'm doing yet. It might be Nocturne, or I might do something else. I mentioned the idea of doing like a gacha game, old gacha account autopsy, which I think could be really interesting. I was on Prince Lemon's stream yesterday, and we were talking about an old RPG gacha game that we both used to play back a handful of years ago. And I was able to recover and get into my account and take a look. So we'll see. I think I'll give Punishing Grey Raven a break this week, and we'll figure something else out for the next gaming stream. But until then, once again, thanks for hanging out, and I will catch you guys in the next stream. Have a good evening.